Okay, so good morning. Today we're looking at verse 13, and this is again about how to practice Tonglen and Lojong, thought transformation, in our daily life in situations where we're experiencing some difficulties, and how we can transform those difficult situations into the path, make it part of the path. So this verse is when someone is angry at us and harming us or trying to harm us. So we're on the receiving end of somebody else's anger and harmfulness. So it says, even if someone tries to cut off your head when you haven't done the slightest thing wrong, out of compassion, take all her misdeeds upon yourself. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So when we first read this or hear this, it may seem rather extreme. It's probably not something that happens every day. But then it does happen to some people, right? There are stories of people who were kidnapped by the Taliban or by ISIS, and they ended up having their head chopped off. And probably more frequent is cases of, like in this country, people who are arrested, accused of a crime, and then they go through some kind of sham trial. These are usually people from minority groups and and poor. They don't have much money, so they can't afford a proper lawyer to defend them. So I don't know if there's any statistics on this, but there's a lot of people in that situation who are convicted of a crime they didn't do, sometimes sentenced to life imprisonment, sometimes even a death sentence. So recently I read a book by Brian Stevenson, who founded a group called Equal Justice Initiative. And he's a lawyer, and he's just been working for decades, he and his colleagues, to try to free people from these situations. But there's just lots of horror stories, and they're not able to do that for everybody. So some people do end up getting executed for crimes they didn't commit. But in our case, hopefully that will never happen. But we might find ourselves in situations where someone is angry and they're taking out their anger on us. They might be verbally abusing us or even physically trying to hit us or throw things at us. So in this kind of situation, our response will probably be anger and outrage and a sense of injustice. I didn't do anything to deserve this. This isn't fair. Why is this happening to me? And we might have thoughts coming up of wanting to retaliate, wanting to, do something back to this person. So this is natural. But remember, if we have bodhisattva vows, there's several of the bodhisattva vows, the secondary vows about that, to not retaliate when abused or accused or blamed and so forth. So we should try not to break our bodhisattva vows. And also, what good would it do if we think about it? Would it really do any good to just get angry and retaliate in such situations? Some years ago, I was in kind of like this situation. I was actually attending teachings by the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, and this other person who was also attending the teachings and sitting right behind me was angry at me. And it was so ironic. There we are, hours every day listening to the Dalai Lama, and then in the break times, this person was abusing me and doing things to try to get me angry. So it was quite painful, and it went on for several days or a week or so. And at first, I was kind of shocked, and what did I do to deserve this? And at one point, when she was sort of telling me off, you were this, you were that, blah, 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 I did respond. I said, but, you're like that too, because it was clear that she was projecting a lot of stuff on me. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I knew it was wrong. I knew I shouldn't have done that. It wasn't the right way to respond. And sure enough, it was just like pouring kerosene on the fire, you know, it just, her anger just increased. So after that, I said, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Keep my mouth shut and just practice patience and put up with this. And I used various meditations like on karma. That was easy because I could remember as a child, even in this lifetime, you know, saying nasty things to my siblings and some of my friends. And so I didn't even have to think about past lives to find cases where I did something similar to somebody else. And that was really helpful. It really helped me to, you know, think, okay, now I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of nastiness. And it's so painful. And I never, ever want to do this again. I never want to subject anyone else to this kind of behavior. So I made a very, very strong commitment from my heart, you know, to never treat anyone like that again. And I also thought about her suffering, and it occurred to me that, you know, if I compared my suffering, being treated like this, to her suffering, the anger that she must be experiencing, I thought she probably has more suffering than me. Her suffering is worse than mine. And that really helped. That helped to soften my mind and feel compassion for her, actually feel compassion. But I wasn't able to get to the next step of wanting to take on her suffering and her misdeeds. And I wasn't ready for that yet. But then I was thinking today, there's a kind of logic. I mean, this isn't probably new to you, but there is a kind of logic to the practice of Tonglen. Because if we think about why are we in this situation of somebody mistreating us, going back to past lives, we created some negative karma. Maybe we did this exact same thing to somebody else. So why did we do that? Where did that come from? Well, it's our disturbing emotions, greed, hatred, ignorance, and also the self-centered attitude, the self-cherishing attitude. That must have played a role there. So that's the real culprit. That's the real cause for me to be in this situation and having this suffering. Of course, there's many other conditions as well. The other person's anger, the other person's delusions, yes, but we can't do much about that. We can't go into their mind and fix them and get them free of that. But we can work on our own mind. So if we can recognize that link between the self-centered attitude in myself and the suffering that I'm experiencing, then the practice of Tonglen is taking that person's suffering and their negative karma and so on and so forth, taking into oneself, not to have more suffering, but to use that energy to overcome my own delusions, disturbing emotions, and the self-centered attitude, so that I'm free from that. So, yeah, and that's what we do in the meditation. We imagine being free of that state of mind and all the other disturbing attitudes. Okay, so it's like using the other person's suffering and negativity to free oneself from the real cause of negativity. So if you understand that and then you try practicing that, then you can actually be happy to do it. And this morning I was also thinking of a story that I heard from one of my teachers, Rilbu Rinpoche. I don't know if any of you had a chance to meet him. Wonderful Lama. He's passed away now. He didn't escape from Tibet in 1959 when many of the other Lamas did. He stayed for another couple of decades. And because he was a Rinpoche, a High Lama, he had some bad stuff happening to him. He spent some time in prison, but then he was released and he just continued living in a house in Lhasa. And he was warned that they were going to come, the authorities were going to come and get him and do something to him. Apparently they would do these sort of acts of public humiliation of the high lamas and rinpoches and noble people, subject them to some humiliating experience. So he knew something was going to happen. And in the morning he was doing his prayers and he was doing Lama Chupa, and he had just gotten to that verse in the Lamrim section about Tonglen, the one we repeat 3 times. May all sentient beings suffering and negativity ripen on me. May all my good things ripen on them, and so on. So he was doing that, and he was really meditating on it, really sincerely wishing to do that. And at that moment, the police arrived to take him away. And what they did was they put like a dunce cap on his head and then some sign around his neck, probably saying something really negative, what a bad, horrible person he was. And then they made him stand in the back of a cart, and the cart was, carried through the streets of Lhasa. Okay, so pretty humiliating thing. And but he said he didn't suffer. He wasn't upset about this because he was in that state of mind of really sincerely wishing all sentient beings' sufferings and negativities could ripen on him. And this experience he was having, may this eliminate the suffering of all sentient beings, and so on. And as he was telling this story, I think it was actually at Vajrapani. It was probably before Fabienne was there, but he was teaching at Vajrapani. And the translator was almost in tears. The person who was translating this, was just almost, unable to stop crying. And but Rinpoche himself, as he was telling the story, was just so calm and patient, like not showing any distress or. So it was like clear that it wasn't a distressing situation for him, but it was a chance to practice Tonglen, to really get a taste of the Tonglen practice. So stories like that are really inspiring, really, really beautiful to show how the practice of Tonglen can help us in such situations. Of course, it doesn't mean that if someone's trying to harm us, we should just, be like a carpet and let ourselves be harmed. We can run away if we can, or, stop the person as long as we don't do anything unethical. Okay, so we don't have to just put up with other people's mistreatment, but sometimes that's not possible. Like in that situation, there was no way he could get out of that. And so this shows us there is an alternative to, being angry and wanting to retaliate and so forth. So we can try this out with little problems that we have with other people, like if someone's just giving us a dirty look or saying something not very nice to us. We could try out this practice, and then if we get used to doing it with small things, then build up gradually, and maybe one day even be able to do it with these really big problems like what this verse is talking about.